Welcome to this episode of Game and Earn. In today's video, we're going to go over some of the biggest gainers in terms of value for the last 45 days. Specifically, we're going to be looking at Nintendo console games only. We're going to take a look at both loose, complete in box games to see where you can make some profits. With that out of the way, let's get to it and find some ways to game and earn. First up, I'm going to talk about one of the original 17 games launched for the NES, also known as the Black Box games. These games were released as the first wave of games to hit the market for the NES, and are often sought after heavily by collectors. People mostly go after the big names like Mario Bros, Gyromite, and a little later after that Donkey Kong, but these games are all pretty much sought after. The game I'm going to talk about is Clu Clu Land, which is a puzzle game that seems to have become harder and harder to find. It's not exactly the most popular game, with more in common with Atari titles than Nintendo titles, but it's still sought after by collectors. And, fun fact, the rupee graphic for the Legend of Zelda series was taken directly from this game. In the last 45 days, this game has increased roughly 26%, starting around the $45 price to the current $57 price range. Sales volume with this is a little on the lower end and gets roughly one sale a week. As with most every game, condition is key here, as some of the higher end sales are from near mint labels. This is definitely the type of game where people are going to go after label upgrades. So even if someone has it, they're going to take an upgrade in condition most of the time. Moving on to a legendary game that came out a decade after Clu Clu Land on the Super Nintendo, Final Fantasy III, also known as Final Fantasy VI in Japan. It's my personal favorite Final Fantasy game, and this was the first game I would consider an actual epic story and one of the best JRPGs of all time. This game is one of the first games people would consider to have cutscenes, well before they were popularized on later consoles like the Sega Saturn and PlayStation. Let's talk about the price though. Final Fantasy III is currently sitting near the peak of its all-time high, currently clocking at $80 for a loose copy. However, this title often fluctuates, usually dropping from the $80 range to the $65 range, and with a healthy sales volume of nearly 13 copies a week, those numbers are pretty stable. So, if you're patient, you're going to be able to snag a copy for the low end of $65, but a good condition copy will still run you $75 plus on the regular. So, I'm going to have to call this one a sell. If you've got any extra copies, feel free to get rid of it. But if this is the only one you got and it's your play copy, definitely hold on to it. It's a wonderful game, and I only see it going up in the future. And what better way to follow up one of the best SNES games of all time with another contender for that title, Super Metroid. Super Metroid defined an entire genre of games, and that is well deserved, because this game is near perfection. The third entry in the series, this one follows Samus again as she travels to a new planet to recover a baby Metroid. The player has to fight bosses, unlock new weapons and armor, and fight their way through the planet. I wanted to cover this game not just because it's awesome, which it is, but because it's finally broken through the $400 price point for complete in box copies. Previously, this game was just under the $200 mark, even as late as February 2021, and since then it has basically doubled in value. This has always been a hard to complete copy, as there were a decent number of inserts. Also, there was the added problem that in the mid-90s there were those UPC rebates, which caused a lot of boxes to get damaged. Even now, if you look for complete in-box copies, you're going to find plenty of them with the UPC cut out. With all that being said, in the last 45 days, Super Metroid has risen from just over the $300 mark to the current price of $402 for a complete in-box copy. I don't think we're going to see this plummet back down anytime soon. We should see it stabilize right around the $350 mark, but this is such an amazing game, and good condition copies are going to continue to demand higher and higher prices. This is a definite hold for me, or if you find one about $300 or less, I'd be buying it. Alright, we've done enough mainstream titles. Let's go with something a bit more obscure. I'm thinking Spirits and Spells for the Nintendo GameCube, complete in box. Spirits and Spells is a 3D platformer where you have to play as two different characters trying to save your friends who have been turned to stone by the boogeyman. You needed to traverse all kinds of spooky locations in order to find the mad scientist's laboratory. We don't usually see hidden gems pop up anymore, but I would 100% classify Spirits and Spells as one of those. This was a game where before the pandemic, you could find a complete in-box copy in mint condition for less than $50. However, now the complete in-box price has more than tripled that, with the current price sitting a hair below $180. I think everyone knows the GameCube has made a bit of a resurgence in recent years, and this is a title that everybody wants. The other reason why this game is so pricey now, aside from it being a fun adventure platformer, is that it isn't all that common. With a low sales volume of barely one per week and hardly more than 3 copies on eBay at any given time, this was a really low print run title. If this title continues to grow in popularity, I can see this becoming one of the next big $300+ GameCube titles and joining the ranks of Cubivore, Gotcha Force, and more. If you could find a copy around the $150 mark, I'd be a buyer, as I can see this title only going up from here. It wouldn't be a proper Nintendo video without mentioning at least one Nintendo Switch title. The choice today is going to be Atelier Ryza 2, Lost Legends and the Secret Fairy, released in 2020. Ryza 2 is a JRPG from the Atelier series, which has been around forever, and most games utilize an alchemy-based system to craft items and equip your team. It follows the JRPG mold pretty tightly, but it's generally viewed as a solid entry in the series. We're talking about it now, though, because it is now entering the long line of highly sought after Nintendo Switch titles. It seems like every week there is a new low print run Switch title that people are chasing, and I think now Ryza is getting its moment to shine. The Switch collecting scene is extremely healthy and thriving, and with so many titles, there's always going to be gems missed by the masses. That being said, Ryza 2 is one of the better performing ones from that list. It held steady around the MSRP of $40 for quite a long time, but since October this title has hit the afterburners and jumped all the way to nearly $80, with some copies actually fetching more than $100. I won't cover the limited editions, you can view those at your own leisure, but those are also very sought after items. With the demand for Switch titles and the low chance of this being reprinted, I see this title continuing to rise to averaging $100 or more for a complete in-box copy. For now, I'm going to go with a buy label, but you could convince me to hold if you really twisted my arm. Handheld games won't be forgotten here, and right now I want to go over a spin-off game for one of my favorite series ever, Dragon Quest Monsters Joker 2. The first Dragon Quest Monsters game came out in 1998, a couple years after a small indie title named Pokemon was released. It followed a very similar formula that Pokemon already had. Players would capture, train, and battle the monsters in the Dragon Quest world. It was extremely popular and quickly became a fun spin-off series from the main Dragon Quest titles. In particular, Joker 2 was released on the Nintendo DS, which provided a whole new way to play for RPGs and team management types of games. The systems were improved from the previous installment, and it quickly became very popular on the system. However, it still takes a back seat to all the Pokemon titles, especially those in the Nintendo DS era, such as Soul Silver and Pokemon Platinum. But with a solid sales volume of roughly 3 copies a week, it still has a decent following, and it's still sought after. Nintendo DS titles are becoming more and more rare, at least in complete in-box condition. The cartridges were very small and easily lost, and if you consider the system was marketed in particular to younger gamers, it makes sense that more than a usual number of copies would be lost. Joker 2, complete with all of the inserts, is now safely above the $100 mark, up from the previous $75 mark back in early October. And remember, DS titles came with a ton of inserts, so if you want a truly complete copy, you're looking closer to the $125 range. If you have a copy and aren't particularly into the Dragon Quest Monsters universe, I'd be looking to sell. I do think the price is going to remain steady, but the series is a spin-off and doesn't compare to the Pokemon titles of the era. Alright, well that's going to wrap up this month's Game and Earn video for the month of November for Nintendo systems all the way from NES to Switch. If you enjoyed the content, please make sure to like and subscribe, and feel free to drop any comments with questions or suggestions. We plan on doing monthly videos for all major systems, plus some extra stuff. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.